Vanessa Mendez's high heels clicked across the marble floor of the office building like small bursts of confidence. She had just signed the $1 million contract of a lifetime with the Almeida Group, the culmination of years of sacrificing relationships and weekends in the name of professional success. Her fingers slid frantically across her smartphone screen as she absorbed each notification like a small dose of dopamine. Congratulations came from all sides. Colleagues, collaborators, even competitors who now looked at her with barely concealed envy. Passing through the revolving doors, Vanessa waved her driver away. She wanted to walk and feel the energy of the city, absorbing the glances that would surely recognize her aura of power. That's when her phone vibrated with a message from Ricardo Almeida himself, the group's CEO, congratulating her on her impeccable performance. His eyes fixed on the screen with such intensity that he almost tripped over a man sitting on the sidewalk. "Miss, can you help me with something?" the man asked in a hoarse voice. Vanessa took a step back, instinctively clutching her designer bag to her body. Her eyes quickly scanned the figure. Worn clothes, disheveled gray hair, a wrinkled face. In her calloused hands, a small notebook with a worn leather cover. Something inside her snapped. Perhaps the pent-up stress. Perhaps the arrogance of newfound success. "Do you realize who you're bothering?" Vanessa asked, raising her voice. "People like you are a waste of space on this avenue. You should be ashamed of yourself for bothering people who actually work and contribute to society." The gentleman did not flinch. His brown eyes remained fixed on hers with a dignity that, for a very brief moment, disconcerted her. Passers-by slowed their pace. Some discreetly pointed their phones in her direction. Vanessa noticed but didn't care. Being filmed humiliating a beggar would only reinforce her image as a ruthless executive. "Do us all a favor and find shelter. Or better yet, find a job," he finished, adjusting his blazer before walking away. What Vanessa didn't see was the man slowly opening his notebook, taking an expensive pen from the inside pocket of his worn coat, and writing something down in impeccably elegant handwriting. The next morning, despite the late-night celebration, Vanessa woke before her alarm. Her morning routine followed meticulously timed steps. 40 minutes of exercise, a cold shower, and nutritious, flavorless coffee prepared by her private chef. It was his first day with the new client. The Almeida Group represented not only a multi-million-dollar contract, but also his definitive establishment in the exclusive circle of Brazil's business elite. Upon arriving at the group's imposing headquarters building, she was greeted by a receptionist with a discreet smile. "Miss Mendez, welcome. Mr. Almeida is waiting for you in the Cedro room." When the door to the room opened, Vanessa felt her blood run cold. Sitting at the table, wearing an impeccable suit, was the same gentleman she had humiliated on the sidewalk. His gray hair was now perfectly combed, and the wrinkles on his face seemed to tell tales of wisdom. Beside him, a younger man stood to greet her. "Miss Mendez, I'm Ricardo Almeida, and this is Antonio Almeida, my father and founder of the group." He insisted on attending this initial meeting. The old man said nothing. He just watched her with the same deep brown eyes that had stared at her from the sidewalk. The room spun around Vanessa for a moment. In her 15-year career, she had never been caught off guard. "It's a great pleasure to meet you both." His voice came out controlled, as if nothing was wrong. The meeting passed in a haze of unreality. Ricardo discussed project details while Vanessa responded automatically, her professionalism keeping her running on autopilot. The gentleman, Antonio Almeida, remained silent throughout the presentation. His fingers, which she had thought fragile the day before, now manipulated documents with the ease of someone who knew every number better than she did. In the end, when Ricardo left to answer a call, Vanessa tried to apologize. "Mr. Almeida, I need to apologize for yesterday's incident. I didn't know." He interrupted her with a gentle gesture. "Don't apologize for things that don't truly bother you. I look forward to seeing who you really are in the coming months." During the first week, Vanessa transformed her anxiety into frenetic productivity. She slept only 4 hours a night, obsessively reviewing every detail of the campaign. Her team noticed something different, an almost desperate urgency in her demands. What no one understood was that this obsession had less to do with professional excellence and more to do with Antonio Almeida's constant presence at every meeting. The elderly man never spoke. He always sat in the same corner, observing everything with those penetrating eyes. One late afternoon, After a presentation where Vanessa had demanded that her team redo the material for the third time, she found herself alone in the room, obsessively organizing her notes. "You know why I'm here, don't you?" Antonio's voice sounded unexpectedly close. "To evaluate my work, I suppose," he replied without looking up. "No, I'm here to evaluate your character." The silence that followed weighed like lead. "I've met hundreds of talented professionals throughout my life. Brilliant people, capable of creating campaigns that transform entire markets," he leafed through his notebook slowly. "Talent is common, character is not." Vanessa felt her face burn. Under any other circumstances, she would have responded with an eloquent defense of her professional ethics. But the words died in her throat. "I believe people are more than their worst moments, Miss Mendez, and also more than their best. They are what they choose to be when confronted with the truth about themselves." In the following days, her anxiety transformed into something more complex, curiosity mixed with growing unease. Her team noticed the tension, but Vanessa couldn't explain it. Her chronic inability to admit mistakes made it impossible to share what was happening. At the end of the third week, he found a small, unmarked envelope on his desk. Inside was a card with elegant handwriting. "A person's worth lies not in what they possess, but in what they see in others. I need you to accompany my father 3 times a week on field research for the project." Ricardo Almeida's request came at the end of the first month, without any further explanation about what this research would consist of. The next morning, promptly at 7 a.m., Vanessa met Antonio in the car waiting for her. The drive took almost an hour, leaving behind the skyscrapers and entering increasingly humble neighborhoods. Finally, they stopped in front of an old but well-preserved building, New Horizons Community Center. As they entered, Vanessa was enveloped by a rich aroma of spices. The walls displayed vibrant hand-painted murals. In one large area, older women were guiding young people in traditional embroidery techniques. In another, teenagers were working on computers. "Antonio! He's finally here!" A gray-haired woman approached, hugging the elderly man familiarly. Her eyes, upon landing on Vanessa, took on a reserved gleam. And this must be that executive. There was no hug for Vanessa, just a distant wave. Other women gave her similar looks, polite but cold. They knew. Somehow they knew who she was. "Dona Zelia, this is Vanessa Mendez. She will be with us for the next few weeks." Before Vanessa could respond, Antonio had already removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and headed toward an area where large donation boxes were being organized. "You're not going to just stand there, are you?" Dona Zelia's voice brought her back to reality. "We have work to do." The next 3 hours were a surreal experience. Vanessa, who hadn't done physical labor since her teens, found herself carrying boxes, organizing shelves, and helping with food preparation. I watched, out of the corner of my eye, as Antonio, the billionaire founder of one of the country's largest conglomerates, worked side by side with volunteers and beneficiaries. He knew everyone by name, asked about specific family members, and celebrated the small achievements of children who approached him with adoration. The most shocking scene was when a young man in worn clothes entered the center, visibly distraught. Antonio spoke with him at length in a quiet corner, hugged him at the end, and discreetly slipped what appeared to be money into his pocket. "Who was that?" Vanessa asked when the boy left. "Carlos, formerly homeless. He's been trying to stay sober for 8 months and rebuild his life. Today was a difficult day, the anniversary of his mother's death. The simplicity of the answer completely disarmed her. No judgment, no moral lesson, just the acknowledgement of a human reality she chose to ignore in her bubble of ambition. In the car, on the way back, she finally broke the silence. "Why did you bring me here? What does this have to do with the marketing project? You can't sell what you don't understand, Miss Mendez." It wasn't until the next day that she understood. The Almeida Group's mysterious venture wasn't a luxury shopping mall as she'd assumed. It was a creative, economy community complex designed to create bridges between traditional artisans and the broader market. And the field research wasn't a punishment. It was a mirror. As the second month began, Vanessa's professional life began to unravel. The campaign was showing disappointing numbers. Her team, noticing her distraction and frequent absences, gradually lost enthusiasm. During a particularly tense meeting, Eduardo, her creative director, confronted her after everyone had left. What's going on, Vanessa? This isn't your usual level. I'm just reevaluating some approaches. Well, while you evaluate, Daniel accepted an offer from the competition. The news was like a punch in the gut. Daniel was their most talented digital strategist. People aren't tools you use and discard when convenient, Eduardo said, his words hitting a nerve. That night, Vanessa faced an impossible choice. Abandon her visits to the center to focus exclusively on saving the contract, or continue this unofficial penance that inexplicably was beginning to mean something to her. He sent a message to Ricardo asking for guidance. The answer was laconic. My partner trusts you to make the right decision. The next morning, against all instincts of self-preservation, Vanessa found herself on her way to the community center again. This time, something different happened. A young woman of about 20 approached timidly as she was organizing a bookshelf. You work in marketing, don't you? I study design, online when I can. Can I show you something? Without waiting for an answer, she led Vanessa to a computer where she was working. On the screen was a series of surprisingly sophisticated designs, images that captured real emotion, genuine hope. I do this for the center. Posters, flyers, nothing professional. Vanessa examined the work with a trained eye. There was something in those simple designs that her expensive campaigns never managed to capture. An authenticity that spoke directly to the heart. What is your name? Louisa. Your work is extraordinary, Louisa. Do you have any formal training? The young woman shook her head. I can't afford college. I learn online with free tutorials. For now. That for now contained more genuine ambition than Vanessa had encountered in any boardroom in years. Throughout the day, other interactions began to penetrate the armor Vanessa had built. An elderly woman, teaching embroidery techniques, shared how she had supported 5 children. After becoming a widow, we don't need much to create something beautiful, he explained. You just need respect for the material, patience, and love for what you do. The profound simplicity of that philosophy contrasted dramatically with the endless discussions of disruption and value maximization that dominated his corporate world. Vanessa spent the night rethinking the entire campaign strategy, an idea taking shape, an idea that just a month earlier she would have considered absurdly risky to her reputation. Are you suggesting we integrate community center artisans into a high-profile marketing campaign? Ricardo Almeida's voice betrayed his incredulity as he watched Vanessa's new presentation. The 3rd month had begun with a complete turnaround in his strategy. The meeting room was packed, his team, group executives, and, as always, Antonio watching from the corner. I'm not just suggesting we integrate them, Vanessa replied. I'm proposing that they be the center of the campaign. What we're selling isn't just a commercial venture. It's a new form of human connection through commerce. Eduardo took the floor. Our initial studies show a surprisingly positive reception to the concept. People don't just want to buy products. They want to know the stories behind them. Ricardo, however, didn't seem convinced. And the costs? Training people with no experience in corporate communications seems like an unnecessary risk. With all due respect, Vanessa replied, the biggest risk would be creating yet another generic, forgettably polished campaign. The silence that followed was tense. It was Antonio who broke it, speaking for the first time in a meeting. My son, perhaps it is time to explain to Miss Mendez the true purpose of this project. Ricardo exchanged a meaningful look with his father before nodding. This is no ordinary commercial project. What we are developing is a creative economy hub focused exclusively on valuing local artisans and producers. A model that, if successful, we intend to replicate in other communities. What about the community center? It's not just a place where we do research, Ricardo continued. It's the birthplace of this project. My father conceived and funded it years ago, working anonymously as a volunteer to truly understand the needs of the community. Eyes turned to the elderly man in the corner, the billionaire who chose to spend his days mentoring young people, the powerful businessman who had been humiliated on the sidewalk without revealing his identity. That afternoon after the meeting, Vanessa went to the community center without Antonio. While photographing crafts, Donna Zelia approached her. You look different today. Different how? Less hardened. You found out who old Antonio is, didn't you? Vanessa nodded. Why didn't anyone tell me before? And miss the chance to see his face when he found out? Besides, not everyone knows. For many here, he's just Mr. Antonio, the dedicated volunteer, But you knew. From the beginning. I met Antonio over 30 years ago, when he was just an ambitious businessman starting his empire. What was he like? Not unlike you, to be honest. Determined, brilliant, and completely obsessed with success and status. What changed? It's not for me to tell his story, but I can say that Antonio discovered the hard way that there are things money and power can't buy or fix. He decided he would spend the rest of his life living between two worlds. What about the ragged clothes, sitting on the sidewalk? This is what he calls his character test. Every now and then, he goes out into the streets, appearing to be just an elderly man in need, and observes how people react. He says he's learned more about human nature this way than in decades of running boardrooms. Chapter 7. The campaign's transformation was well underway when disaster struck Vanessa. The video of her humiliation of Antonio resurfaced on social media and went viral, accompanied by the caption, "Meet the true face of corporate success." Within hours, Vanessa's face was all over social media. Outraged comments poured in. Hashtags like "arrogant executive" became trending topics. By the end of the day, 3 major clients had canceled contracts citing incompatibility of values. Sitting in her office, staring at her computer where notifications continued to pile up, Vanessa felt strangely calm. A part of her had always known this moment would come. His Dios. Phone rang. It was Ricardo Almeida. My office in an hour. Upon arriving, Ricardo was waiting for her alone, without Antonio this time. "Miss Mendez, I assume you are aware of the situation." "I am. And I will understand perfectly if the Almeida Group wishes to terminate our contract immediately." Ricardo watched her for a long moment. "Actually, I have a different offer. You can leave now, with a generous severance package. You can preserve what's left of your career elsewhere, maybe even in another city." He paused significantly. "Or you can stay, face this publicly, and continue building something that might actually matter. Why offer me this choice? Why not just fire me? Because my father insists there's more to you than that video shows, and because your new approach to campaigning is brilliant." That night, after hours of reflection, Vanessa recorded a video apology. Not a calculated statement, but a moment of authentic vulnerability. Many of you have seen a video where I show you the worst of myself. I have no apologies to offer, only an acknowledgement. That was me, or at least, that was a part of me that allowed success to obscure my humanity. I'm not asking you to forget or forgive immediately. I'm just promising to do better. The response was brutal. Cruel comments flooded her social media. But days later, something unexpected happened. The women at the community center began publicly defending her. Dona Zelia gave an interview talking about the transformation she had witnessed. Luisa posted an emotional video describing how Vanessa had recognized her talent. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. On a particularly difficult afternoon, Vanessa encountered Antonio in the garden of the Almeida Group building. "How are you dealing with all this?" asked the old man. "Honestly, it's the hardest thing I've ever faced, but also the most liberating in a way. Do you know why I chose to remain silent during all those initial meetings? Because I wanted to observe whether you spoke differently when you felt in control, compared to when you felt vulnerable. And me? You're learning to remove the masks. It's a painful process. It always is." Chapter 8. I want to integrate the official launch of the project with the neighborhood's annual cultural festival. Vanessa's proposal was met with stunned silence in the meeting room. It was the beginning of the 5th month, and the community festival was scheduled for 8 weeks away. "Are you suggesting we launch a multi-million-dollar venture into a neighborhood festival?" Ricardo's voice was filled with disbelief. "Exactly. I propose that we use local artisans and artists themselves as authentic ambassadors for the project." Ricardo looked uncomfortable. For the first time since the project began, he visibly hesitated. "Vanessa, I appreciate your progress, but this is too risky. Mixing a social project with serious business could drive away traditional investors." That's when Antonio cleared his throat slightly. All eyes turned to him. "Perhaps it's time to clarify some details about this project. Details that not everyone is fully aware of." He walked to the center of the room. "Decades ago, I was exactly the kind of entrepreneur who valued only numbers on spreadsheets. I built an empire based on efficiency and profit, until a personal loss forced me to reevaluate everything." The silence in the room was absolute. Even Ricardo seemed absorbed in his father's words. So, I decided to live between two worlds. I kept my business, but I started spending time on the streets anonymously, learning from people that society makes invisible. He looked directly at Ricardo. This project is not just another commercial venture. It is my final legacy. The bridge I always wanted to build between the two worlds I have inhabited. I am the primary investor. Always have been. This project was conceived as a test, for my son, for you, for all of us. The revelation fell like a bombshell. Ricardo maintained an expression impossible to decipher. Vanessa felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, everything made sense. One night, while working late, Vanessa received an unexpected visit from Ricardo. "There's something you need to know," he said. "Something that could jeopardize the entire project. We have other investors besides my father. Investors who came on board when I presented the project as a conventional commercial venture. And they are pushing to transform the creative hub into a purely commercial enterprise. They want big brand stores, well-known chain restaurants, the conventional model." "And what did you answer?" Ricardo hesitated. "I said I would consider the proposals. Does your father know about this?" "No, and you can't know." Vanessa realized she was facing a more complex moral crossroads than she had imagined. Exposing investor pressure could save the social project, but it would destroy the father-son relationship. Remaining silent would mean becoming complicit in the transformation of something meaningful into yet another empty business. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked. "Because, surprisingly, you've become the person with the most integrity on this project." Over the next few days, Vanessa immersed herself in research on successful social impact businesses around the world. She worked with her team to identify patterns, study case studies, and compile figures that demonstrated the genuine economic potential of the original project. It was during a visit to the community center that he found Antonio alone in the small office he used. The elderly man looked tired. "Is there something going on with the project that I should know about?" Antonio asked suddenly, his piercing gaze fixed on her. Vanessa felt her heart race. Ricardo had been explicit about keeping his father out of the investor pressure. "We are working on multiple scenarios for the final presentation," he replied carefully. "Vanessa, over decades of building businesses, I've learned to recognize when someone is withholding important information." She felt her face burn. "Ricardo asked me not to share certain challenges. He wants to solve them without worrying you." Antonio nodded slowly. "My son has always believed he needs to prove his worth to me through success. Did you know Ricardo brought in outside investors without consulting me? Investors who are probably pushing for a more conventional model?" Vanessa couldn't hide her surprise. "How did you—" "I didn't build an empire by being naive. Besides, Ricardo has always been an open book to me, even when he tries not to be." He turned to the window that overlooked the courtyard, where children were taking part in an art workshop. "Do you know what my biggest mistake as a parent was? Believing I could teach values through tests and indirect lessons, instead of honest conversations. Don't repeat my mistake, Vanessa. Honesty may be painful in the short term, but silence creates wounds that never fully heal." As she left the center that afternoon, she made a decision. She couldn't simply create a compelling presentation for investors. She needed to find a way to reconcile father and son, business and purpose. "Your father knows about the investors." Vanessa's words hung in the air of Ricardo's office like a bomb about to explode. "How?" His voice wavered between disbelief and resignation. "He didn't tell me how he found out, but he knows, Ricardo, and I think he always knew." The executive sank into his chair. "All I tried to do was protect the project, ensure its financial viability. I believe you, but there's more at stake here than just the viability of the project. This isn't just a business test, it's a values test." Ricardo took a yellowed envelope from a safe in his office. "This is my father's will. He gave me a copy 5 years ago when he was diagnosed with a heart condition. The doctors gave him only a few years to live." Ricardo slid a document toward her. "Read the highlighted paragraph." Vanessa read softly. "To my son, Ricardo, I leave not only the presidency of the Almeida Group, but also the responsibility of honoring the true purpose of our wealth, to serve as a bridge between worlds that rarely meet. I spent years trying to prove my worth through numbers, expansions, acquisitions," Ricardo confessed. "I believed that was what my father expected, despite his words to the contrary. And now, Now I realized that perhaps I was proving myself to an image of him I had created in my mind. The ruthless businessman who built an empire, not the man who found purpose beyond power. What will we do about the investors? What we should have done from the beginning. Present the complete and original vision of the project with full transparency about its social and commercial objectives. Over the next few days, Vanessa and her team prepared for the pivotal meeting, building a unified narrative about how social impact and commercial success could coexist and reinforce each other. The Almeida Group's meeting room was packed. On one side were the investors, 5 men and 2 women. On the other were Vanessa, Ricardo, Antonio, and Eduardo. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ricardo began, "today we will not present multiple options for the future of our enterprise. Instead, we will share the only vision truly aligned with the core values of the Almeida Group." One of the investors, James Foster, frowned. "Ricardo, I thought we were discussing alternatives." Over the next hour, Vanessa delivered a meticulously structured presentation featuring data on the growth of social impact businesses, case studies of similarly successful ventures, and trend analysis showing how the younger generation prioritizes authentic experiences. Then, Vanessa changed the tone of the presentation. "Now, I'd like to introduce some people who will be an integral part of this project." The door opened, and Dona Zelia entered, accompanied by Luisa and 3 other artisans from the community center. For 20 minutes, each presented their work, their stories, their hopes. "This is not a charity project," Vanessa continued. "It's an investment in a new business model that recognizes that economic value and social value can not only coexist, but also enhance each other." Foster was unimpressed. "Sentimentality doesn't pay dividends. I need to remember that we're here as investors, not philanthropists." Antonio, who had remained silent, slowly stood up. "Mr. Foster, allow me to ask you a question. How much is your reputation worth? How much is the trust of your partners worth? The respect of your family? The ability to look in the mirror without looking away?" The investor shifted uncomfortably. "That's irrelevant to the discussion. On the contrary, it's the heart of the discussion. We're talking about value, not just price." He walked slowly around the table. "For decades, I built businesses based solely on financial metrics. I was respected, feared, immensely wealthy, and deeply unhappy. I'm not asking you to give up on financial returns. I'm inviting you to expand your definition of returns." An investor, Sophia Martins, raised her hand. "I came prepared to support the conventional business model, but this presentation made me question whether we are stuck in an outdated investment paradigm." The discussion that followed was intense. Foster and 2 other investors remained skeptical, but the others showed growing interest. In the end, Ricardo made the final referral. "I thank everyone. We will incorporate relevant insights into the project, keeping its essence intact. Those who wish to remain as investors under these conditions are welcome. Those who prefer other paths, we understand." When the room emptied, leaving only Vanessa, Ricardo, and Antonio, an exhausted but satisfied silence hung between them. "Did we get it?" Vanessa asked. Ricardo smiled. "Foster and 2 others will probably leave, but the rest are inside." Antonio watched his son with a new eye, not just the pride of a mentor, but the respect between equals. "You chose the hardest path," said the old man. "I'm proud of you." Something broke between them in that moment, an invisible barrier of unspoken expectations and unconfronted fears. The last 2 months of the project were intense, but in a completely different way. It was no longer the exhausting pressure of impossible deadlines, but the positive intensity of collaborative creation and shared purpose. The launch, integrated into the community festival, was unanimously approved. The entire team worked closely with artisans and community leaders. One particularly busy morning, Luisa burst through the door, agitated. "Vanessa, you have to see this." The young designer displayed an email confirming her acceptance into a scholarship program at one of the country's most prestigious design schools. "I did. They loved my portfolio of work for the project." Vanessa hugged her spontaneously, genuinely sharing her joy. 6 months earlier, she would have considered such a display of emotion an unseemly weakness. The transformation wasn't limited to Luisa. Throughout the center, similar stories were unfolding. Women artisans had become official suppliers to the enterprise with fair contracts. Young people who previously saw few possibilities beyond the limitations of their neighborhood were now participating in training programs. One afternoon, Donna Zelia approached Vanessa. "When Antonio first brought you here, I bet you wouldn't last a week." Vanessa laughed. "A reasonable bet, given the circumstances. I lost miserably, but I've never been so happy to lose a bet. You know what impresses me most? It's not just what you did for the project. It's what the project did for you. I never imagined that my greatest professional achievement would also be my greatest personal transformation. That's how true success works," Donna Zelia replied. "It's not something you achieve. It's something you become." The day before the big event, Vanessa was working late when she received a message from Ricardo, asking her to meet him and Antonio on the roof of the Almeida Group building. When he arrived, he found father and son admiring the city's night view. "We've called you here to thank you," Ricardo said, "and to share something important. Tomorrow, during the official launch, we will announce the creation of the Novos Horizontes Foundation, dedicated to replicating the model we've developed in other communities." "That's extraordinary. We would like you to lead the foundation," Antonio added. The proposal caught her completely off guard. "Me? But why?" "Because you saw the bridge between the worlds, and because you crossed that bridge, transforming yourself in the process." "I need to think about it," he replied honestly. That night, alone in her apartment, Vanessa gazed out the window at the city. The same view that had once represented her conquered domain now seemed like an invitation to explore new horizons. The day of the festival dawned with a surprisingly blue sky. The neighborhood streets, decorated with colorful banners, pulsed with contagious energy. Vanessa arrived early, wearing something unthinkable in her previous life. Simple jeans, a white blouse, and ballet flats. Her hair, once tightly tied back, now fell in natural waves. The external transformation reflected something much deeper that had occurred internally. The center of the main square had been transformed into an exhibition space for local artisans and artists. A crowd was already gathering, mixing locals, visitors, media, and potential business partners. As the morning wore on, the festival came to life. Cultural performances took place on scattered stages. Children participated in workshops. The aroma of traditional foods filled the air. It wasn't the sterile atmosphere of corporate launches Vanessa was accustomed to, but something much more vibrant. An hour before the official ceremony, she found Antonio sitting calmly on a bench. "Have you decided on our proposal yet?" he asked. Vanessa nodded. "I will accept to lead the foundation." "Excellent. When would you like to start?" "Actually, I have a counter-proposal. I'd like to spend the next 6 months at the community center, learning directly from Donna Zelia, before officially assuming leadership." Antonio raised his eyebrows in surprise. 6 months without an executive salary, working on the front lines? Exactly. I believe I still have a lot to learn about the two worlds before I try to build bridges between them. The old man looked at her approvingly. "You've really changed, haven't you?" "Thanks to you." Antonio shook his head. "No, I simply offered a mirror. You chose to look into it and do something about what you saw." At that moment, a van from a TV station arrived, causing a commotion. "Looks like your festival has gotten some mainstream media coverage," Vanessa commented. "Actually, they're here because of you. The video of our first meeting, remember? Now they want the rest of the story." Vanessa felt a knot in her stomach. Despite her transformation, the idea of public exposure still made her uncomfortable. "Don't worry," Antonio continued. "Ricardo has already instructed our staff. They are not allowed to approach you directly." When the official ceremony began, the area around the stage was completely packed. In the center, Ricardo waited beside a large covered panel. "Welcome to this historic moment for our community," he began. "Today, we celebrate not just the launch of a venture, but the birth of a new way of thinking about business, community, and purpose." When Antonio spoke, he was greeted by warm applause from local residents who knew him not as a billionaire, but as the dedicated volunteer. "For decades, I lived divided between two worlds. That seemed irreconcilable. Today, thanks to the work of extraordinary people, these worlds are beginning to converge. True wealth isn't found in bank accounts. It's the ability to see value where others see only lack." He announced the creation of the New Horizons Foundation and the appointment of Vanessa as its future leader, mentioning her decision to spend 6 months learning at the community center before taking the position. When a journalist tried to approach her after the ceremony, Ricardo gently intervened, reminding her of their agreement not to give individual interviews. "Thank you for this," Vanessa said as the journalist walked away. "But I think I'm ready to share my story, not as a marketing ploy, but as an honest testament to transformation. If it can help others trapped in their own traps of empty success, maybe it's worth the exposure." The next 6 months passed at a completely different pace. Gone was the constant pressure of impossible deadlines. In its place, emerged the intensity of full presence and genuine learning. As promised, Vanessa dedicated herself fully to her work at the community center, absorbing lessons about compassionate management of scarce resources and how to build trust in communities marked by distrust. One rainy afternoon, he found a small notebook with a worn cover, the same one Antonio had been carrying when he first met him on the sidewalk. "He left it for you," Donna Zelia explained. "He said it's time for you to have your, own." As Vanessa flipped through the pages, she discovered that most of them were blank. Only the first few pages contained notes in the elderly man's elegant handwriting. On the first page, a simple inscription, "For Vanessa, to record her journey between worlds. With gratitude for showing me that transformation is possible at any age." The tears came unexpectedly. They weren't tears of sadness, but of profound recognition of the gift she'd been given. Not just the notebook, but the opportunity to redefine what success meant. As the weeks passed, Vanessa began filling the notebook with her own observations. She recorded stories of the people she knew, their struggles, dreams, and small victories. She documented her own learning experiences, the times when old habits tried to resurface, the uncertain steps toward a new way of being. The project was progressing as planned. Ricardo, now fully committed to the original vision, regularly led visits to the construction site with community members. When the day of the foundation's inauguration ceremony arrived, the auditorium of the newly built Creative Economy Center was packed. Representatives from various communities, potential partners, political figures, and the press were in attendance. When it was her turn to speak, Vanessa took the stage without the outward signs she had previously considered essential to her credibility. Without the impeccable suit, without the intimidating high heels, without the mask of inaccessibility that she mistook for authority. "A little over 8 months ago," she began, "I was at the pinnacle of what I considered success. I firmly believed that I knew what value meant, what fulfillment meant. Then, on an ordinary sidewalk, I met someone who would completely change my understanding of success, not because he offered me a new path, but because he held up a mirror to me." Vanessa shared her journey with honesty, the moments of resistance, the painful discoveries, the transformations. She spoke about the difference between price and value, between status and purpose. The foundation we launched today is not just an organization with a social mission. It is an invitation to collectively rethink our definition of wealth. It is a reminder that the most valuable resources are not those quantified on balance sheets, but those that reside in the human spirit. Creativity, compassion, resilience, wisdom. She concluded simply, "True wealth is not in how much we possess, but in how much we recognize in others. It is not in the power over, but in the power with. It is not in the answers we have, but in the questions we dare to ask." After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Vanessa found a moment of quiet in a small garden adjacent to the auditorium. Antonio joined her. "A remarkable speech," he commented. "Honest, inspiring, genuine. Thank you. For everything. Not just for this opportunity, but for that day on the sidewalk. Do you know what impresses me most about your journey? It's not just that you've changed, but how you've changed. Without self-pity, without turning your own transformation into a new form of ego. What now? What's next? For me, to continue my quiet work. For Ricardo, to learn to lead with purpose, not just ambition. And for you," he watched her with genuine interest. "What's next, Vanessa?" She contemplated the question, feeling a clarity that would have been impossible months before. "Building bridges," he replied simply. "Between worlds, between people, between forms of knowledge. Not because I have all the answers, but because I've finally learned to ask the right questions." At the auditorium entrance, Ricardo waited with Donna Zelia and Luisa. Together, they represented a living bridge between worlds that had remained disconnected for so long. As they walked together to the celebration, Vanessa felt a deep gratitude for the journey she had traveled. Not despite her stumbles and failures, but because of them. For it was at her lowest point that she had found the path to her best self. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson of all, that even our darkest moments carry seeds of light, waiting only for the courage to recognize them and the persistence to cultivate them.